Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 4. Slow Smoke Spit. I stumble on that every time. Slow Smoke Pigskin Podcast.
Yes, there you go, sir.
Hey,
Hello,
I'm Eric.
everybody.
That's Drew.
Hey.
So let's talk. First of all, the fantasy season is now completely finished because we had a payout for week 18. I am not doing that crap again. I spent like an hour getting everyone's scores, finding best ball lineup because there was no automatic way. And at the end of it, I won. I got a really high score that would have been great to be on a week that counted, that Sleeper recognized, but didn't. We're not doing that again. So be it. I won.
I don't envy you at all for having to do that. I didn't even want to calculate my own score, regardless of what it was going to be. But yeah, the week 18 in the NFL was really pointless. I mean, I think there was maybe 2 games that really mattered. The other ones had to wait on other games to fit. It's a joke.
Yeah, I'm very glad that we didn't have it for any real fantasy that counted, and I don't even want to do the weekly winner. I was debating another proposal for the league is, to keep the dollar amount about the same for weekly winners. Maybe for the last 4 weeks of the season, we make the prize 25 instead of 20, because that way it keeps everybody trying extra in the playoffs, but we'll see. That's just here or there. Other league news, we found a new manager. It is a guy named Eric Cooper. I honestly don't know a lot about him. He is a friend of Jason Smith, who joined the league last year. He is apparently the guy who introduced Jason to fantasy football, but he hasn't played Dynasty before. So welcome, Eric. And sorry, I'm going to take your money.
Welcome, sir.
Off-season meeting needs to be scheduled in the next month or so. What I'll probably do is just pick a couple of dates and times and put up a poll on Sleeper to get people's opinions on what their preference is, and get that done so we can talk about all these rules. And I'll also probably, since nobody reads the Constitution or the comments in the Constitution, I'll put up a summary of the changes that I'm proposing so that maybe you can do a pre-read like this was a work meeting, but probably not anyways. So
it's hard enough to get anybody to do anything in this league anyways, but hopefully we can change that moving forward.
We shall try. NFL news. There's a whole bunch of things going on since it's the end of the season. What you want to start with, Drew? Coaches? Why don't you talk about some coaches?
Let's talk about some coaches. Fired: Ron Rivera, Mike Vrabel, Arthur Smith, which I find ironic because he's going to make $17,000 a day for the next 3 years. From
getting fired from coaching is not a bad gig. Like, you got a guaranteed contract and you just keep getting paid to not do your job. I mean,
yeah, you basically get to work for 3 years and then you don't have to work anymore.
Yeah, Ron Rivera and Arthur Smith were kind of expected. Mike Vrabel was kind of a shock to me. I mean, I know he hasn't had the best last couple of years, but he is a coach that players like playing for.
I agree. I mean, I think that yes, everybody speaks very highly of him. He's a player's coach, but in the division that they're in, especially in the last couple of years, like they definitely have snuck into the playoffs a couple of years, but with the talent that they've had, he hasn't really done a whole lot. And it's been they've won the last 4 games to get into the playoffs and usually make a first round exit anyways. So I've heard rumors that he's possibly going to become the Patriots head coach. He wants to go back there. He likes it up there. I mean, he's not a terrible coach, and there's going to be plenty of openings. Obviously, the Raiders have an opening. The Chargers have an opening. So there's 5 or 6 teams as of now that don't have a head coach. So
yeah, Chargers opening. It'll be interesting to see. Raiders should just go with Antonio Pierce. But on the Mike Vrabel thing also, I thought it was funny because there was talks about the fact that he could be traded since he was still under contract and somebody could have to give up picks or something. And the Titans owner, Amy Adams Strunk, I believe is her name, was asked about why they didn't why they just fired him instead of trying to trade for him. And she said, it's too complicated. And we wanted to move on quickly. It's like, great. So you could have got something for him, and instead it's too complicated when you're running a billion-dollar business, whatever.
Clearly, the GM doesn't know what he's doing either. Was he fired too? I think one of the teams fired their GM also. I don't remember who it was.
Panthers, I know, fired theirs.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it took. Yeah, I won't say anything against females, but it sounds very vaguely familiar to what females.
Yeah.
Say in argument.
So talking about some player news, I just had to laugh that depending on your scoring settings, but at least in our Sleeper League scoring settings, the QB1 for Week 18 was Carson Wentz. Who saw that coming? QB1, Carson Wentz. It might have played him into getting a contract next year. He's supposedly, from what I have heard over the past few years, although he hasn't gotten contracts and been playing a ton, supposedly he's a real bad locker room guy, and that's why he's been having a tough time getting the deal, but is what it is.
He was on one of I don't know if they were a show on Hard Knocks. Obviously, I think it was when he was with the Colts, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. But anyways, he didn't seem like a bad guy, but like it's TV and they're not going to show stuff like that on purpose, obviously. But yeah, I mean, definitely I think out of the 32 NFL teams, I want to say there was 7 that actually started the same quarterback the entire season. The rest of them all got hurt or were in and out type of thing. So he had a chance. He still obviously can play.
I believe I heard the number was 66 different starting quarterbacks for this season.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you've got the Jets who were just rotating quarterbacks there for a minute.
Yeah.
Idiots.
Player news, what you got?
We got Laporta injured, not playing this week, I think I read.
I hadn't heard that one yet.
I could be wrong. I haven't heard anything on Jalen Hurts.
I heard that he had an x-ray. There's no fracture, but whether he's going to play or not, it's unclear.
I heard TJ Watt, or you're gonna say something about TJ Watt.
Oh yeah, TJ Watt. He's got a grade 2 MCL sprain. I can never remember, is grade 2 or grade 3 worse?
I don't know.
Come on, you're the ER.
We don't do it by that. You have a sprained knee, go see an orthopedist. They'll tell you.
All right. Well, either way, he's got a grade 2 MCL sprain. He was officially ruled out for the game. And so then on Twitter, JJ Watt said, think they'd notice? And I think that'd be hilarious. JJ, just go put on TJ's jersey and play. Just don't take your helmet off on the sideline so no one notices.
I mean, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure fine and forfeiting the game, but whatever.
I mean, I don't think they're going to win either way, so it's worth a shot.
Valid point. Speaking of that game, they're playing in Buffalo, and the weather is supposed to potentially be very cold and snowy because it's Buffalo in January. So that'll be interesting. I heard that game and Kansas City and the Dolphins at the Chiefs are both supposed to get some wintry weather, which for the Dolphins is a bad sign because they're a warm city team. And if I remember correctly, I saw something that Tua's record in the cold below 40 degrees is not very good. And they're talking about it being single digits at game time. So,
well, I mean, it is what it is. It's on Peacock anyway, so no one's going to watch it.
That's so crazy that they're putting a playoff game on Peacock. Although the funny part about that is I heard that this is just Roger Goodell flexing and a way to get money out of all the Swifties to pay for Peacock for them to be able to watch Kelsey in this one game.
I mean, maybe Taylor Swift will just pay Peacock off and let it be on CBS. Come on.
Yeah, I was talking to a coworker today about whether or not the relationship's real. I'm not going into that. I ain't touching
I just looked it up. Laporta outside shot to play against the Rams. So one of those doubtfuls, but maybe it's a playoff game, so maybe he'll try and go with the first series and then not play the rest of the game. We'll see.
Another interesting stat I saw on NFL playoffs: the Bengals finished last place in the AFC North with a 9-8 record, which meant every team in that division finished above 500. And the Bengals missed the playoffs, whereas the Bucks are the 4 seed with a home game with a 9-8 record. Just kind of crazy how this division system works out.
Right. I want to say a few years back, it was maybe the Titans or somebody, they had a losing record and made the playoffs with obviously teams with winning records that missed, but that's just.
I know the Seahawks made it at one point at 7-9, I believe, a few years back. Other player news: Puka Nacua, the new rookie receiving yard record. The 49ers tried to make sure it was hard on him. He actually didn't get to his 29 yards until the second half, and they were double teaming him. They were trying their best not to let him get that record. It's pretty funny. But then again, part of me has a problem with some of these records at times because they got extra games now. Like, it's up to 17. It used to be 16, and before that it was 14. So it's kind of unfair to compare some of these records. But
hey. I mean, that's agreed. I mean, obviously, Tyreek Hill didn't get the record, but they were saying how he was going to get 2,000, and he needed one more try to get this game. But when Calvin Johnson got almost 2,000, he didn't have it. He only had the 16 or 17 week season. So I agree with you on that. Like, but again, moving forward, it's like that is what it is. It's harder to score, with defenses the way that they are and stuff like that. So you never know.
Yeah, and the crazy part is that with all the talk about how many yards Tyreek had, CeeDee Lamb ended the season with like 50 yards less than Tyreek at the end of all of it because CeeDee was huge the last, few weeks. I think he put up almost like 500 yards in 3 weeks or something like that. It was pretty good.
Yeah, CeeDee definitely put up the last quarter of the season versus the first quarter. So he did. Yeah, he finished strong.
All right. Any other NFL news you want to talk about?
I don't know if you saw it or not, but Derrick Henry had a nice going away speech. Is he done? Is he know that he's not going to sign again with? He knew Vrabel was getting fired, so he doesn't want to play there anymore. Like, I don't know.
I don't think he knew Vrabel was getting fired because I saw a quote from him being surprised about Vrabel being fired. That being said, I mean, he's 30, which is definitely older for a running back, but his first couple of seasons, he was playing behind DeMarco Murray and stuff, so he doesn't have as much wear on the tires as I say he doesn't have as much wear on the tires as your normal 30-year-old because he hasn't played as many seasons, but damn, in those seasons, he got a lot of touches. I don't think he's done in the NFL. I think he's probably done in Tennessee.
Yeah, the more I think about it, the way that these teams are running 2 setbacks where you've got your first, second down, you've got a third down, you've got a short, like I don't see him. He can help a team out in the red zone on third down when they need, a few yards here and there. And running backs, I think you'll start to see that their longevity goes a few more years, whereas 3 or 4 was the average. And now you're seeing, running backs become, a little bit, they're playing a little bit longer than they had before just because of the way that teams are going to a 2 running back set.
Yeah, they'll play longer, but less time, running back by committee, shared time during that.
Yeah, which is going to make it hard on those fantasy owners having to figure out who's going to score points that week.
Yeah, no joke. And the rookie class coming in, which we'll talk about at some point, doesn't look great in the running back position. And considering how they're getting paid, I can't blame them. All right. So, main topic of this episode, now that we're past the news, we were going to talk about some of the busts and values for the season. Busts being players who were drafted high and did not return on the investment, and values, or some people like to refer to them as league winners, because these are the people that you drafted in the later rounds that performed, and that's generally what's going to get to a winning fantasy season, is getting those later round people to perform. In general, just wanted to point out that we used sleeper information based on our league settings, so that if you go to other websites, it'll be slightly different and different scoring systems. And also to point out that sleeper ADP is based on, and for anybody who doesn't know, ADP is average draft position. Sleeper ADP is generally based on primarily dynasty startup drafts. So there's some redraft mixed in, but once again, you might see different numbers if you go somewhere. So don't come at us.
I don't think it's going to be relatively that. Yes, it's going to be different on different platforms, but relatively overall, it's just that sleeper is what we use, and so that's what we decided to go with.
Yeah. So let's start with the busts. Now, in general, like if somebody had a season-ending injury, especially early on, players like Nick Chubb and J.K. Dobbins, they're not interesting to talk about, right? Obviously, they hurt your team, but it was a season-ending injury. Wow.
It is an industry, but it's not a season.
Because once they went out, you weren't counting on them anymore. If they only got injured and missed a couple of games or something, you still might have counted on them for your team. So let's start with the quarterbacks. Drew, who you got?
I went with I got two. I got Trevor Lawrence and Bryce Young. I know these guys are probably a little confrontational just because they haven't totally proved themselves, but based on their stats, Trevor Lawrence was an ADP of 31.5. He was projected at quarterback 8 or 9. He finished quarterback 13 with 254 fantasy points. He averaged 17. He was projected, like I said, quarterback 9 to finish quarterback 9 with 311 points. So it's a significant drop in what the production was if you were looking at him to be your quarterback 1. And he did have some really good games, but they're still going through some growing pains down there in Jacksonville. Obviously, they missed the playoffs this year when they shouldn't have. But I got him as a bust, not just because I traded him to Janelle like 2 last year, a year before, but I'm just saying I saw it coming.
No, I mean I can't disagree. Like he didn't finish horribly. He played most of the season. I think he missed a game or two, but a lot of people were. I mean, if he was ADP of 31, that means you're talking. I think that's skewed a little bit because of dynasty. Because otherwise, that's a 3rd round pick, and that seems a little high. I think in redraft leagues, he was probably more like 5th round. But when you take a quarterback that high and they finish 13, and also 17 points a game for a quarterback is nothing to write home about. Like,
especially a running quarterback who can get some yards, can score some touchdowns. Like, he just didn't. He didn't perform to what he was supposed to, I think. And this one again is another one that's kind. What's that?
Who's that?
I said Bryce. I was going to go on to Bryce Young.
That's what I was about to say. Yep.
Another one that's he hasn't. It's a tough one to say, but everybody was expecting him to his ADP, which is and again it's probably based off of a rookie draft, I guess. ADP was 15. No, I'm sorry. His ADP was 107 and his quarterback ranking was 15. He finished at QB 41 with 145 fantasy points. He averaged 9.7. He was only projected to be quarterback 26 at 247. So, yeah, you took a chance on the kid to actually perform. He obviously doesn't have a team around him if they're in the rebuilding stage. But you're telling me that, a quarterback that –
he didn't miss any games, did he?
I think
he played every game. So to finish –
no, I want to say he missed one.
Oh, well,
I don't think he played every game, but again, a quarterback that can run, that can do some things with his feet. Like, you can't get more than 9 points a game. Like, it's not
number 1 pick in the draft.
Yes.
To finish QB 41. Like, that's pretty rough.
I think I could probably do QB 30 myself if I'm being honest.
Go for it. I'd like to see it. I want to see it happen.
I'd like to try.
All right, my quarterback bust for this year was Patrick Mahomes. Now, he finished quarterback 7, which doesn't sound bad. I mean, that's a QB1, but he averaged 17.8 points a game, and you have to look at the opportunity cost you took to get him. And on average, I have him as taken as quarterback 1, and it says ADP was 2.1. In general, most drafts I saw, he was going in round 2 or round 3. And when you take a quarterback in round 2 or round 3, they better perform. And he did okay, but if you're taking him in round 2 or 3, you need 20-something points a game, which he just didn't do. I don't want to put the blame fully on him. His receivers, we've talked about, dropped balls all over the place. Travis Kelce wasn't the player. Their running game came alive. Their defense came alive. But if you took Mahomes in the 2nd or 3rd round, I don't think a lot of those teams made the playoffs and probably didn't win a lot of championships. So I don't want to say that it's a indication of early round quarterback as being a bad thing, because Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts were, I believe, number 2 and number 3 quarterbacks taken, and I think they finished as 1 and 2. So there is some validity, but it does also point out rushing quarterbacks in fantasy are a big deal.
Yes, the quarterback position has changed, just like the running back position has changed a little bit. You don't have the Matt Staffords that, the
5,000 yards. Like,
it's just not happening anymore.
If you're not going to be a rushing quarterback, you got to be throwing for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns to keep up with the rushers.
Herbert, who obviously got hurt and was hurt all season, but he's like kind of that in between. He's going to sit back and throw, but he can still get things done with his legs.
He'll give you a couple hundred rushing yards a year.
Yeah, and it's scramble yards. It's not Lamar Jackson where I'm going to run for 100 yards a game and pass for 200 yards a game. That's kind of where, I mean, I've seen a lot of people say that Lamar Jackson is the number 1 quarterback in the league right as of right now. But that's, especially when you're looking at quarterbacks coming out of college. The number 1 quarterback is that Michael Vick, Lamar Jackson style quarterback. Right now,
we're going to talk
about
his
name. He's out of Washington.
Caleb. You're talking about Penix. I don't think he's number 1. There's Michael Penix. There's Caleb Williams, Drake May, Bo Nix. There's a bunch of kids coming out that are going to look good, but obviously the rushers are going to be big for fantasy.
Yeah, so they're taking touchdowns away from running backs and wide receivers too. So you got to keep that in mind.
So speaking of rushing, let's talk about some running backs who were busts for this season. Now, you got the big names, so I'll let you go first, because I got some ones who are kind of personal gripes or something. So let's go with the big guys for you.
All right. So my number 1 is Tony Pollard. He is 80. What's that?
I said that makes me sad.
I know it does. ADP was 27 at running back number 8. And based off of his previous years, following Ezekiel Elliott, everybody thought that he was just going to be monster this year. He finished at running back 19 with an average of 11 points a game and 177 fantasy points. Projected to do about 213 fantasy points. You and I have talked a lot about him. I think his red zone, I think the part that he fell short was just his red zone efficiency.
Touchdown.
Just getting stopped and stopped and stopped and stopped.
I mean, official numbers might have been he got drafted at RB8. I saw I heard a lot of people preseason putting him as a top 5, and he finished as an RB2, RB19, but he also didn't miss any time on a points per game basis. It was probably less than that. Like, he actively hurt your team.
Yeah, you can't put your RB1 at 11 points a game, and you're not going to win many championships. You'll make the playoffs, but you're not gonna. It's not gonna. You can't score 10 points a game and think that that's going to be okay for one of your RB1s. So, Number 2 is Austin Eckler. Again, somebody that I believe was
he was
RB1 in a couple of drafts that I did. Managers really took a chance on him. His ADP was 10, RB3. He finished at RB28 with 152 fantasy points and a 14.6 average. Again, projected to do 262 points. So he was you needed him to do about 20 points a game to really reap the benefit of that RB top 3.
Like you said, I mean, he was a first-round pick, potentially running back 1, 2, or 3 everywhere I was seeing go. I don't know if it was he had an injury and that affected him some. He came back, didn't look right, and it's just a real bummer because he is a really good dude, and he's 28.6 years old, and don't know if he's going to get another contract. And he had a quote that was like, he'll come back to play if he gets a contract that he thinks is worth it. And with the amount of I know he's somewhat of an entrepreneur and trying to do other things, like, there's a chance Austin Eckler never plays football again.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a decision that he needs to make, but I don't think that in fantasy world, he's not going to be a top 10 running back next year. Like, you can't count on him. With the decline of running backs, the decline is so fast. It's not like they do this very often to where it's like, oh yeah, that year he's going to come back, especially at his age. So good luck to him in the entrepreneurial world.
Yeah. All right. Mine, I got first one, Miles Sanders, who just absolutely disappeared this year. He wasn't a top end pick. He was drafted RB22, but finished as RB54 and just disappeared for a lot of the season. On a points per game basis, he was running back 62, finished at 4.6 points a game. Like, I remember in the offseason, I had him as a trade target. I'm pretty sure Eddie had him on his team, and I shot a trade offer trying to get him on there. But luckily, Eddie said no, thanks, Ed. So I didn't have to deal with that. And then another one who was a big bust for me. Luckily, he was a player who I actually never had faith in, but Dameon Pierce of the Texans. Like, he came out last year as a later round pick, set the world on fire. Everybody was super excited for him. He moved up draft boards a whole lot this year, was drafted as RB17, finished as RB52, and at the end of the year, he was barely playing. Devin Singletary had moved ahead of him on the depth chart and was performing. So, sorry, Damien, that ain't happening. Moving on to wide receivers. Once again, I'm going to start with another one that was personally hurt me. I had a whole lot of belief in Jahan Dotson. He, second-year player for the Commanders. He had a good rookie year where he had almost equivalent production to Terry McLaurin when he was on the field. And he was a later round pick that I had hopes of being one of those value picks to help you win a league. Average draft position 94, drafted as your wide receiver 34, finished as wide receiver 55, but that's only because he played the entire season. On a points per game basis, finished as wide receiver 71 with 5.9 points a game. That's rough.
That's unproductive. That's unproductive.
Yeah. Another one, T. Higgins. T. Higgins, part of it was, I know he had a bunch of injuries this year, but he was frequently, if I remember correctly, a pick right around the 2-3 turn, and he finished at wide receiver 49, wide receiver 44 on a points per game basis. Another player who you put in your lineup, he actively hurt your team. And then one more player who I have never been a big fan of, but he got a lot of hype, Jerry Jeudy.
Roll Tide.
Yeah, yeah. But he was drafted as wide receiver 23, finished as wide receiver 50. And, everybody thought, coming out of college, he's this great route runner and he's clean and crisp and he's a young player. And Cortland Sutton just well overtook him this year. It was funny. Last year, Cortland Sutton was getting some hype, and then Jerry Jeudy, I think, finished the season ahead of him. Cortland Sutton didn't show up this year. Nobody had faith in Cortland Sutton, and all the dude did was score a touchdown every freaking game, and Jerry Jeudy just kind of disappeared.
Yeah, I mean, I had Sutton on my team, so it was nice, but it's one of those things where you couldn't trust him, you couldn't trust Sutton, whereas when you put someone like T. Higgins, you kind of have to play him in hopes that big game happens, which is kind of that's the battle in the manager's head when they're setting their lineups. But yeah, you can't anything when you're setting your lineup and someone's only averaging 9 points a game, 9.7 points a game, that's not going to win you anything. I mean, yeah.
So who you got is your wide receiver disappointments?
Disappointments. I got Garrett Wilson, ADP right about 19. Wide receiver numbers, projected wide receiver number 7. Finished at wide receiver 30, again, just around 10 points a game. One of the interesting stats I was looking at was last year he had 174 total points. So you're thinking that he's going to improve upon that. He did not. He got less. He had 169 points this year. So
the only thing I'll say about Garrett Wilson is he obviously disappointed her fantasy. He's an amazing player. Thought that he would absolutely be a wide receiver 1. His quarterback situation was obviously horrible. He was quoted recently as saying that this was the worst year of his life with all the quarterbacks he was playing with.
So agreed 100%. When you're talking wide receivers, if no one's getting you the ball, you're not going to score any points. So, that it's tough, when you're thinking Aaron Rodgers is going to be my quarterback and I'm his guy and we're going to put up some points and some numbers and stuff like that. But when you look at all of the last 4 people that we talked about, Dotson, Higgins, Jeudy, Wilson, none of them didn't have their quarterback their whole season. So, but this one, he did have his quarterback his whole season. Cooper Kupp. You thought he was going to just continue. I think he was out for the first 4 games. 3-2. He was out for the first couple of games.
I knew he was out.
Broken his hamstring, but either way, projected wide receiver 9, finished at wide receiver 40. So again, was he hurt? Did Puka take away from him? I felt like those two can offset each other, and when one's getting the ball, the other one's doing well, but it didn't really seem like it. So,
the only thing I'll give about Kupp is that he was a gamble going into the draft, and you knew there was some risk coming in, but it turned out even worse than I think anyone would have imagined.
In a redraft league, I would agree with you on that one. But he was, if someone wanted to trade for him, you're still trading wide receiver 1 first round stuff for him at the beginning of the season or in the offseason.
I try and focus on our dynasty league, but I had a redraft league where when Justin Jefferson got hurt, Cooper Kupp was right at the same time Cooper Kupp was coming back. Yeah. Somebody offered me a Cooper Kupp for Justin Jefferson, knowing that I was not going to have Jefferson for the next 6 weeks. I was like, I couldn't hit yes fast enough, and that did not work out well.
Exactly the point. So, anyways, moving on. Tight ends.
My biggest disappointment personally was Darren Waller. I targeted him in a lot of drafts because, in the preseason, there was all this talk of the connection with Daniel Jones, and Daniel Jones was only throwing to him in practice and blah, blah, blah. Well, combination of Daniel Jones being hurt, Darren Waller being hurt for a bunch of the season, he finished as tight end 21, and it was only that good because, he barely played and he was a disappointment.
Yeah, agreed. Tight end is a tough spot because there's not a lot of production out of it. You're not looking, I mean, like a few years ago, obviously, the one I'm about to talk about, Travis Kelce, but even Kittle, 2 years ago, last year, was scoring more points. I mean, he's probably a big disappointment too, because you draft him or, get him on your team to score points. And I think he averaged 4 points a game.
The problem
anyways.
with Kittle, just to throw it out there, is that Kittle is a very boom or bust player. He goes off for these huge games and then he just disappears. As an NFL player, he is probably one of, if not the best all-around tight end. But as a fantasy asset, he's so boom or bust. He's tough to have on your team.
And so, talking about Travis Kelce, when I was looking at over the stats, I was like, he really didn't bust that much. But when you've drafted him as tight end 1, in some leagues he was a first rounder. His ADP was 7. I mean, he was, after the first 3 wide receiver, he was the next receiver taken in the draft as a tight end. He only averaged 11 and a half points a game. I mean, he finished at tight end 3. Again, there's not a whole lot of competition, so you can't go for that. The biggest disappointment is he only scored 174 points this year at 11 and a half, which out of a tight end, out of a first round pick, you need 17, 20, 22 points a game consistently. Yes, you can have your off games, but you also need those 30-point games where you score 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And he just fell off. Obviously, we're all going to blame Taylor Swift. But realistically, like, he should be happy and good and glad and everything is good. That whole Kansas City team just does not look like the old Kansas City teams in the past. All the way around. Mahomes didn't look good. Kelce didn't look good. Their receivers were garbage. So
Pacheco will look good, but I think we might talk about him. But anyways, there's enough being negative. Let's be positive. Who's some values? Who helped people win leagues this year?
Go for it.
So I'm gonna. It's funny. I'm gonna have kind of a trend here that hopefully you can find when I'm looking at these values. So for me, quarterback value, CJ Stroud. Number 2 pick in the draft. Obviously, he's a rookie. Nobody expected him to be huge. He finished as quarterback 12, which is, it's a QB1, and he was drafted as a QB 19. I don't think anybody saw this coming, and that's with missing a couple of games. He averaged 18 points a game, showing up big in the later stages of the season. He missed those 2 games in a row for a concussion, but that kid has a real bright future. They got a good coach in Houston. That team's going to be interesting. They got a couple of really good wide receivers, and they got some future going.
Yeah, obviously they made it to the playoffs, which is the goal. The goal is to win the Super Bowl, which I don't think they have that in them this year, but it's definitely something to look for them in the future. I went with Brock Purdy. Clearly, he's outperformed everything all around as a football player. The last pick of the draft, the worst contract in the NFL. Like, he's playing for the least amount of money. He hadn't lost a game in a while, or a home game or something like that. He had a little fall. He came back from injury. ADP 23. Finished at quarterback 7. Averaged 18 points. Like, he's one of those quarterbacks where if you want to spend money on your wide receivers and your running backs and you put him in there, he's going to get you 18 points, but you didn't have to spend a lot of money on him to get him on your team. I believe he was in our league last year when Garoppolo went out. He was on the waiver wires and he got picked up off of waivers. So he's just a guy that's just going to be efficient. He's got so many weapons around him that he's not going to put up 30, 40, 50 points like some of these quarterbacks can that run the ball and stuff like that, but he's going to be consistent at 18, 20 points a game. And
yeah, in real life fantasy, that kid has showed up and been impressive.
Yep.
Mr. Irrelevant. So who you got at running back?
Running back, I got Rashad White. Second year in the league. ADP was 79, projected running back 26. Finished at running back 7. 235 fantasy points, right around 14 points a game. He outperformed what he was supposed to do. So, I think that it's a guy that you could count on every single week in and week out, and you just, set it and forget it. I believe he played every game.
They talk about the running back dead zone sometimes in fantasy, usually rounds like 4 to 7, 4 to 8. Like that didn't pan out this year. There were some real good players who showed up for you in those rounds. And I mean, it was looking like he was about a 7th round pick. And if you had him, he was a value that absolutely helped your team all year long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nice compliment to your true RB1 that you had on your team, guys that you knew that were going to perform. Another one, James Cook, projected to be RB30, drafted around RB30, right around ADP of 90. Finished RB11, 12.5 points a game. You at round 4, round 5, I think that's exactly what you want. Again, it's another nice compliment to where he was consistent throughout the season. 12.5 points. Like, yes, you want him. You get him, and you get someone like a Christian McCaffrey who's putting up 25 points, and that now you've gotten 30, 35 points out of your running backs for a week in and week out, and that's really gonna win you a championship. So
absolutely, you got the values that came out pretty well. I took the 2 value players who finished as RB1 that just absolutely set the league on fire. I got Kyron Williams as my value running back. His average draft position was 391. He wasn't drafted in most leagues. I mean, unless you're talking about a dynasty or some very, very deep league. And he finished as RB6. And that's with playing only 12 games this year. He still finished as RB6 overall. If you look at it on a points per game basis, he finished as RB2 with only Christian McCaffrey having more points per game than him. They fed him the rock a whole lot. He had lots of touchdowns. He's probably going to be a first-round pick in a lot of redraft leagues next year. It'll be interesting to see if he can hold up. And the other player who was a value for me running back was Raheem Mostert, 31-year-old Raheem Mostert. You're not supposed to be able to be this good of a running back. Well, unfortunately, he's now missed, the last 2 weeks, which was a surprise. That was always the concern with him all season long was, he's had a history of injuries. When is he going to get hurt? And it was unfortunate that he ended up hurt at the worst time, fantasy championship weeks, but he was drafted. This says ADP of 188. That's got to be once again a dynasty. I think in redraft leagues, he was probably more like around 120, 130, but he was drafted as the 47th running back. Overall finish of RB4, points per game, RB3. He carried a lot of teams as a late round pick.
He's going to be interesting next year because they have a chain, however you pronounce it. A-chain? There you go.
So it was in college he called himself A-chain, and that's what they called him for years. And then apparently at one point this season, once he started to get notoriety, he corrected people and was like, it's actually A-chan. And it's like, what the? They've been calling you A-chain for years, and now you're suddenly A-chan?
That's like in baseball. We called Mike Stanton. We called Mike Stanton for the longest time, and now he wants to go Giancarlo. But anyways, I see those 2 guys just flipping their roles. I feel like Mostert still can be that backup, a third down quarterback or running back to where he's not going to be hit on, 20, 30 runs a game. And because A-chain, whatever you want to call it. A-Chan. I mean, dude, he put up a 50 point. They both put up, I think, 40 plus points in the same game. That
was a crazy game.
Right. I think that it's going to be an interesting dynamic. I think they'll just flip roles for next season because Mostert has one more year with the Dolphins, unless he's trade bait, but who knows?
All right, wide receiver.
Obviously, I went with Puka. Again, it's just one of those guys that just where'd he come from, and all of a sudden he's on the stage. He had a good start because he was catching the ball and Cup wasn't on the field, so he got off to a hot start. He averaged 14.5 points a game. Again, great value for a wide receiver, 77, 331 ADP. Like it's just a no-brainer that you got to put on your value. I chose someone that I had that was helped me out throughout the season a little bit. DJ Moore, or wide receiver 19, finished at wide receiver 6. At about 14.5 points a game. A guy that I just set it and forget it unless he had a couple injuries throughout the game where you had to keep an eye on it. But again, he was there. He was the guy that they were throwing the rock to. So it was easy to start for him.
If I remember correctly, like the first 4 years of his career in Carolina, he was 1,100 yards and 4 touchdowns every year. He's finally getting some touchdown equity, and he's Justin Fields' favorite target. If Fields stays there, then
different podcast, different time. But yeah, I'm curious to see what this draft is going to look like.
So I mentioned my theme for some of my
the
players.
State of Texas. Something with you in the state of Texas.
Wide receivers, my 2 picks for values this year on the same team, Tank Dell and Nico Collins. Now, Tank Dell unfortunately got hurt on a goal line rush that he never should have been in on, but he only played 11 games this year, and so he finished as wide receiver 39 in 11 games. On a point per game basis, he was wide receiver 15. If he had actually been able to play all season, it would have been real interesting to see what happened with him. And he was drafted as wide receiver 65. The guy right ahead of him at wide receiver 64 was Nico Collins. So the teammates got drafted back-to-back in a lot of leagues. Nico Collins finished as wide receiver 10. And on a point per game basis, wide receiver 6. This team has a young stud quarterback, a couple of young stud wide receivers. They could have some production for some years to come. And then the last position we didn't talk about yet, tight end values. You got to go with Sam Laporta as one. I mean, rookie tight end finished as the tight end 1 on the year. Most rookie tight ends can't perform whatsoever. So for a rookie tight end to show up as tight end 1, that's just super impressive. It's obviously a real bummer he got hurt last week, and it's going to affect their playoffs, but that doesn't affect fantasy, which is what we care about. And then I'll just throw out there Jake Ferguson. Nobody was even sure he was going to be the tight end 1 for the Cowboys. He finished as tight end 8. Dak has had a history of liking to throw to big white tight ends, and so maybe he just thought he was still throwing to Dalton Schultz and threw to Ferguson. So there we are.
You went with number 1. I took number 2, Evan Ingram, which when I was going through the stats, I was I had to talk about this guy because I couldn't believe that he was the number 2 tight end in the league. But he, projected about 95 ADP. A guy that probably hasn't, I don't even know what he's performed recently last few years, but I know it hasn't been this good. He averaged 10 points. And when you're talking tight ends right now in fantasy, if you can get 10 points a week out of your tight end, and I'll be the one to tell you right now who I consistently got 0 to 2 points out of my tight ends throughout the season. At one point, I had 4 tight ends on my team, and the 4 of them didn't average 10 points. So, yes, that's definitely a huge value. And I'm pretty sure I had Ingram on my team at some point in time and was like, this guy's garbage. I'm going to get rid of him. But that's what you want. That's what you're looking for when you get, 11 points, almost 12 points out of the number 1, 10 points out of the number 2. The 8 gets 8 points. That's kind of the standard right now. So.
Yeah, the funny thing about Evan Ingram is that actually in week 18, he had a chance to break the NFL record for receptions for a tight end in a season. He needed 13 catches. He ended up with 10. So, I mean, it's week
Bro.
18, so it didn't count for fantasy, but that's a big week for a tight end. I mean, Evan Ingram's always had skills. You know, his rookie year, I think he set some rookie records at that point, and then had a little bit of down. Now he's been back up, and I think he's under contract in Jacksonville for another year or two.
I want to say it's 4 more years, but I could be wrong on that. I looked it up, but yeah, again, his rookie season, I think this is year 6 for him. So his rookie season, like tight ends were a little bit, they were used a little bit differently back then. So even though he had good production as a rookie, like it was a little overshadowed, and that position has just been one of those tougher positions where it's almost like a make it or break it. Like if you can get that kicker that's putting up 13 points a game, where they're consistently getting some field goals out of him, some long field goals, that's where you make or break it in getting into the playoffs. I mean, fantasy, like, yes, you can have a number 1 quarterback, you can have, you know, your running backs and stuff like that, but like you got to find those little spots where you can get those extra points that will be consistent on a weekly basis.
Yeah, there's a bunch of young tight ends coming up now. McBride, Laporta, Kincaid, Musgrave. Hopefully we can get more than 2 good tight ends as options for us for the future so that can make that position a little more palatable.
I'm in search of one. If anybody's listening out there, like, I'll take a tight end.
Send some trade offers, Steve. So
I've been talking with Steve, but
actually, that's
we can't get on the same page yet.
I forgot I already traded him for one, didn't I?
You did. Yes, you did.
Yeah, well,
and the Joker, which is fine because it's like, yeah, he was another one that was on the fence as far as value, but anyways.
Yeah. So those are our top booms and busts. Busts and values. Obviously, you know, everybody's got a different opinion. There's ours. So we talked way longer than we were supposed to. I don't care. I don't know if anybody listens anyway. So if you did, great, thanks. And if not, oh well.
Yeah. So we appreciate the support. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Drew.
I finished my drink.
Cheers, bud.
Cheers, dude.
Later.